I'm with Chris Mitchell from CBN News. Now, Chris, what is CBN News?
CBN News is Christian Broadcasting Network. It's based in the United States, but it has a bureau here, obviously here in Jerusalem, and one in Washington, D.C., and the headquarters is in Virginia Beach, Virginia.
And how many years have you been here reporting in Israel?
I've been here 16 years, almost 17 years, came in August of 2000.
Wow, so just before the Intifada, or right on the Intifada, was it?
It was right on the Intifada. We came on August 17, 2000. The Intifada began in September 28, 2000. So my wife and 3 children were here just about 5 weeks before the Intifada began. And that was a pretty challenging period of almost 4 years of a lot of suicide bombings, terror attacks, and shootings.
It must have been a little bit like a baptism of fire, really, was it? And was it scary for you as a family?
It was definitely a baptism of fire, and it was scary as a family. I can remember my youngest daughter at the time, Grace, was 8, and literally as I was up at her bedside praying with her at night, there were helicopter gunships going outside, and she used to ask sometimes, "Daddy, when are we going home?" And I had to tell her that we're home right now. So it was a very challenging time. There was a lot of suicide attacks, or I should say several that were close. My son used to go to the Sbarro pizza place, and that was bombed. In fact, I was there just a few weeks before the bombing with my daughter for lunch. So it was a very challenging time. I like to say that he spared us during that time, and it was like Psalm 91, that he that dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide in the shadow of the Almighty, and he protected us.
Now, you must have interviewed many, many interesting people. What's been your most interesting, you think?
Well, that's a great question. I would say lately one of the most interesting interviews I've had was with a Sister Diana up in the northern Iraqi town of Karakosh, which is a Christian village of maybe 60,000 Christians that were forced to leave because of ISIS in August of 2014. We were there almost a little over 2 years later in October 2016, and we toured the city that had been devastated by ISIS, as well as much of the fighting that went on to recapture the city by the Kurdish military and the Iraqi army and by the coalition airstrikes. And just to see what has happened to many of the Christians because of the tour I had with Sister Diana, explaining what they did to many of the churches. One of the most moving times with Sister Diana was in the courtyard of a church called Immaculate Conception, where ISIS had taken out books from the convent, had piled them up in the middle of the courtyard and burned them. So when we were there, all that was left was a pile of ash. And to me, that just kind of epitomized the plight of many Christians here in the Middle East that have suffered enormously because of ISIS and other groups like that.
Being here based in the Middle East, you must have a lot of news stories.
News stories? Yeah. Yes, yeah. There's never a shortage of stories here in the Middle East and here in Israel as well, whether it's archaeology, whether it's politics, whether it's security, whether it's the geopolitical system or situation going on right now. Somebody has said reporting news from the Middle East is like trying to drink out of a fire hydrant. It never stops and it continues, but that's just the way it is here.
Yeah. Now, media isn't always fair when it comes to Israel. As an organization, are you fair?
I think we are. I feel we are. And I think that's probably a true statement that many times the media is not fair to Israel. And in fact, we just came from an interview with Michael Oren, who is in the government right now, and he's Deputy Minister of Public Diplomacy. And we addressed this very issue that many times it seems like Israel takes a disproportionate share of blame for the Israel-Palestinian situation, and yet it's not recognized for many of the things that it does in the world to provide a blessing for, whether it's technology, whether it's medicine, whether it's security. It's a world leader in many of these fields, and it does provide a lot of good for the world, and yet it doesn't seem to get credit for that.
Why do you think the media misrepresents Israel? Do you think it's a form of anti-Semitism?
I do, and I think that it's reflected in some of the kind of reporting that's going on through some of the major media, and I think sometimes that's a reflection of editorial slants that just get passed on from, say, one correspondent to another, and that seems to be what's reflected in much of some of the reporting. I shouldn't say all by any means, but some of the reporting seems to reflect an anti-Semitic or anti-Zionist editorial slant.
And now you've written a book called ISIS, Iran, and Israel. What's that about?
Well, it's about our experiences that we've had in northern Iraq and here in Israel as well. Talks about the threat of ISIS. We've had the opportunity to be on the front lines with the Kurdish military, very close to the front lines of ISIS, where we could see an ISIS flag, and talking about what they have done, like I had mentioned earlier, to many Christians in the area. We talked about also report about the Yazidis, ethnic group in northern Iraq that have really suffered terribly because of ISIS. We go into the ideology, what's fueling their passion. It goes many times back to the Quran and the verses that they take literally about killing infidels. That's exactly what we saw in Karakosh. Many of the graffiti was about killing the infidels, beheading them, destroying their crosses. In Iran, we talk about the dangers of the Iranian nuclear system, but we also talk about some of the good news happening in the Middle East. For example, we sat down with some Iranians in northern Iraq, had come over for a 3-day Bible seminar, and many Iranians right now are coming to faith because of a dream or vision. Wow. We sat down with several who, we were there with 5. 4 of the 5 had come to faith in Jesus Christ because of a dream. The other person had come because she read a Bible. But that's actually, it's a very common occurrence in Iran right now, where many Iranians are coming to faith through a dream or a vision. And so that's another thing that we talk about in the book.
What inspired you to write this book?
I felt like it was important for people in the West to help them understand what's happening here in the Middle East. There's a verse in the Bible that says, the sons of Issachar, they understood the times and they know what Israel should do. In the position that I am in right now, where I have the opportunity to go meet people like these Iranians, I have an opportunity to interview or report on different things that are happening throughout the Middle East. I want to be able to help interpret that, to help report that to people in the West so they can understand some of the dynamics happening here and in the region.
Now, we've just seen ISIS fire rockets, 7 rockets into Israel, into Eilat, just recently from Egypt. Do you think ISIS is a threat to Israel and the Palestinians?
I do. I think it's a threat. Well, it seems to be a growing threat to Hamas inside the Gaza Strip, and I think they are a danger both to the Palestinians and to Israel. Perhaps not as great a threat as Iran is. I don't see that ISIS would be able to sort of come across the border, but I do feel they would love to infiltrate their ideology to Israelis or Palestinians.
Why do you do what you do?
Great question. I feel called by the Lord. I felt we were called here 16 years ago, and I still feel called here to help report on what's happening. My sister told me before I came over here that I'll be able to help explain to fellow Christians what's happening. And I think that's what we strive to do. I hope we do a good job, but that's why I stay here.
Does being in the land give you a good understanding of Israel and the Palestinians actually being here, living here?
Yeah, I think it does. You can meet people face to face. You can certainly read about it almost on a daily basis. And I think when it just becomes part of your lifestyle, it gives you a better understanding of what's happening.
So what's your prayer for the media?
Wow, my prayer for the media is that they would seek and report on the truth, whatever that truth may be in any particular story. That they also wouldn't be influenced by people or situations that would veer them away from reporting on the truth, and sort of break free of perhaps any editorial ideology that they are come here with, and hopefully report and see the truth.
Okay, Chris, thank you very much.
Great to be with you, Paul.